Hello and welcome back. Eddie Radosevich, George Stoia here in studio. Josh McCuistion down in the Houston Soonerscoop.com studios. Welcome back to the Soonerscoop.com YouTube page. A recruiting report here on Monday, November 13th. A victory Monday of sorts for Oklahoma, back in the winning column with a 59-20 victory over the weekend over West Virginia. 2 games left in the regular season. George and I will be back tomorrow for the recruiting report. We'll talk to Brent Venables as BYU week gets underway. Let's jump into a little bit of the recruiting side of things, though. Oklahoma added to the 2025 class on Friday night. I went up to Wagner, Oklahoma to see the Bulldogs, the defending 4A state champions. Quite a scene up there, by the way. I'd never been up there. I know, Josh, we had gone up and seen Coach Kondick a couple times during the spring and done that type of thing. And Alexander Shieldnight, the 2025 defensive end edge from Wagner, makes his commitment official on Friday. Now, 6 of the 8 recruits in the Oklahoma 2025 class from the state of Oklahoma. We've talked about the importance, Josh, of locking down the state, and the addition of Alexander Shieldnight, another continued success for Oklahoma in that recruiting realm.
Yeah, I mean, Shieldnight was one of their earlier offers in the 2025 class because now, guys, you're starting to get into these guys that Oklahoma really has recruited. You know, this staff at Oklahoma has been the primary recruiters on. This isn't where they're having to kind of, rebuild relationships and make people, comfortable with what the new staff is thinking and what they're doing. These are guys that OU's been focused on since early on. I know, Eddie, in your interview, Alex talked about, going down there very early in his career, talking to Miguel Chavis, like really building that relationship. And again, guys, we talk a lot about how much of an impact they're making in 2025, but this is the first guy, I mean, with Elijah Thomas and this is where you get out into Eastern Oklahoma, and then you move into Tulsa. We know Oklahoma City is almost always going to be very good to Oklahoma. There's very few exceptions to that. But Tulsa has been, kind of a grudge match at times. Oklahoma's had some tough losses there. But when you start to move into these areas, obviously a great program like Wagner, I know they've got some good young players they're excited about, so I don't know that Oklahoma's done recruiting Dale Condit's bunch. But this was it's a good win for OU. Alex is as you saw, Eddie, on Friday night, very talented guy that really, affects the game for them in both phases.
Josh, you mentioned the in-state recruiting in Oklahoma. How much of an emphasis has that been for this staff under Brent? And how many guys in this 2025 class could they end up getting from the state of Oklahoma? Because I know you've said before, this is maybe the most talented class in state in some time.
Yeah, I think this is a group that's probably the best one I've seen in state since that 2006 group that produced Gerald McCoy and Sam Bradford and Jermaine Gresham. And I don't know that you have as many of those, again, we're talking about 3 first-round draft picks there, just in that list, to forget guys like Dominique Franks and a lot of other really good players in that group. But I think from 1 to 10, it's about as deep as you'll ever see in Oklahoma. There are so many good players in the state. And, to your question, George, this was one of the first things that when that new staff arrived, when they came in, guys like Brandon Hall, some of the guys that did have some familiarity with recruiting Oklahoma, they got out on the road immediately. They were doing everything they could, trying to build relationships, not just with the schools that have guys, not just at Jinx, not just at Union, the Carl Alberts, like at places that probably haven't had an Oklahoma guy come by in 15 years. They stopped by and, just checked in. And it wasn't, some of it is, hey, who'd you see? What'd you like? Who should we know about? That kind of stuff. But some of it's just engaging in relationships and having those guys care, coming. So they'll come to the coaching clinic. So in 2 years, when some guy from Hennessy saw a kid from, some other small town, it can say, hey, you guys should be looking at this guy, even if it's a preferred walk-on. And that's part of why you're seeing Oklahoma do so well, not only in recruiting in state with the scholarship guys, but really doing a nice job with PWOs and building the depth of that, that next 20 guy, beyond the 85 that we all stay so aware of.
I think I DM'd the group on Friday night, just being up there at Wagner, and his motor, I don't know this for a fact, but it seems like he just is kind of cut from a cloth that you would say, oh, that's a Miguel Chavis guy.
That he is such a perfect fit. I mean, like, it's almost, I wonder, as long as Miguel is at Oklahoma, there's just always going to be a guy like this. Like there's Ethan Downs now.
Sure.
Then you move to Alex Shieldnight. And again, doesn't have to be a white guy, but it just seems to be playing out that way a little bit. But I mean, there's so much that makes sense. And, and Eddie, you talked to him after the game. I did the interview beforehand. He talks like an OU coach. Like, he talked about, I don't care if I've got to be a long snapper, whatever the coaches tell me to do, that's what I'm going to do. What, they want me to play tight end, defensive end, whatever it may be. Like, and it's not, there's no ego about Alex. He's confident in himself. Like, he believes he's a very good player. He believes in his ability, but he's not egotistical. Like, if it takes 2 years to be a player, he'll wait that long. He's just that kind of kid. He's kind of wired with a very old school kind of mentality.
He looks like he could play tight end for OU tomorrow. I mean, maybe that says what OU's tight end room looks like right now.
I think you guys saw the clip of him already that he took the second play of the game, I think 58 yards right down the middle. His speed for that big, I would imagine, Josh, that he's going to be able to add some weight. I think we have him listed at 220 right now. That might be a little bit on the light side, but his frame is something of which that you go, okay, yeah, he spends a couple summers with Schmitty, and I would imagine that he could. I mean, I think that like Ethan Downs is a perfect example. I remember going to see him out at Weatherford High School, and what he's turned into physically, George. I know that's something that we've talked about quite a bit. Is just how much bigger he's gotten here over the course of the last couple years.
Yeah, he's up to what 260 something. I think he's listed at. But Josh, do you think? I mean, he's a defensive end, right? Like he they're not going to move him inside ever, and he's definitely not playing offense, right? Like he is a true defensive end for Oklahoma.
No, because I do want to note the difference between I absolutely hear what you guys are saying. The difference, like Ethan is 6'3" and a half, 6'4". Ethan was a large human being,
sure.
Even as a high school kid. And Alex is more like 6'2", probably.
Yeah.
Like I think that's probably more
fair.
accurate with where he's at. More of a pure edge player. And I know there has been some tight end conversation, like Eddie said. I don't think it's out of place. I mean, I know that's what Arkansas wanted him to play. And, Arkansas's got Luke Haas right now. So, and they've got a good tight end room. So they know what they're looking at. But I think with Alex, he's very much kind of an edge player, probably going to play in that 245, 250 range, a little lighter than some of Oklahoma's other defensive ends. But, guys, when I watch him, the thing that sticks out to me every time, he is so technically proficient. Like when you watch – I watch high school kids all the time, and they get by with their strength or their speed. And he's got strength, and he has speed. But – he is special in the way he uses his hands. He's so violent with his hands. At the same time, he's very good at creating the space he wants to work in. Again, Shieldnight's one of those guys where I don't know. It's because when I say Ethan Downs, you can say he's bigger. Ethan's clearly a bigger framed player, but Alex is a little longer because Ethan's always been a little short armed, but Alex can kind of get like I said, he can use his arms to create space, get players away from his body, get blockers away. And again, I like him. I think there's very little doubt in my eyes he's going to be a very productive college player. Do I think he'll be a superstar? I don't know. But it will be very surprising to me if he's not probably a multi-year starter and a very good player for Oklahoma.
Staying in the 2025 class, you had a chance to see a school that it felt like for the first couple years of Scoop, we were always at Cedar Hill High School, and now they came down by you down in the Houston area. But a pair of offensive linemen / defensive linemen with Devin Colman. Let's start with Jordan Colman first, though. You turn on the tape, and I'm sure that we're going to run it here. A very violent blocker is what it looked like.
He really is. And honestly, you expect that. But, guys, and I think the tape probably does it justice, but this is a large human being.
6'5", 315.
Jordan is very big. Yeah, and he's every bit of what he's listed at. But what you notice is even for a guy, like I always talk about, like, what do his ankles look like? Is he little ankled, because those are usually the guys that move and change direction. I wouldn't say that with Jordan, but he still moves around pretty well. Like he doesn't look out of place pulling. And I mean, again, like you just see bodies flying out of his way. I mean, that is, and guys, this Weiss team that he's playing against, they've got several Division I players, including Adrian Wilson, who was a guy that I at one point had pegged to come to Oklahoma in the class of 2025. So they are this isn't a team without talent, but Cedar Hill, really led by the Colmans, just bullied Weiss. That is actually in the Austin area, Eddie. I know you're really going to care about your yeah.
There's only one school in the Austin area to me.
Is that right?
Yeah.
This is Pflugerville. So yeah, I mean, like, you're talking Pflugerville ISD, which is produced a guy like Samaje Pirine. You go down the list. So there's been some good players from this area, and the Cedar Hill just said, we're going to line up 7 big bodies and we're going to beat the crap out of you, and that's all they did. You felt bad for Weiss because they had no answer. It was like watching a secondary with no hope, but it was just like, what are we going to do? They're 40 pounds bigger than us, and they're just going to beat the crap out of us for 4 quarters. And that's exactly what happened. And it suited them with the way the weather was, like we talked about before. The weather was horrible. But, yeah, Jordan Colman, again, big guy, moves around. Well, he's going to have to change his body up a little bit. Like, there's some bad weight there. But at the same time, he's not a guy, like I said, that struggles to move. He's clearly an interior guy. And, again, he's another one of these guys in this 2025 class in Texas that is going to be a name that OU fans need to remember. And now I will say, we can get into that a little bit, but in the post-game picture, he might have thrown up a hand signal that maybe OU fans wouldn't love, but I think there were mitigating reasons for that.
I was just about to ask you, Josh, who's going after Jordan? I mean, who's the competition for Oklahoma in this one? I would assume there's quite a few in the Texas area.
Oh yeah, I mean, a lot of the normal suspects in the area. Texas is involved. I know SMU has even impressed him early on. Obviously, SMU with their Dallas connections now, they're going to be kind of interesting to follow now that they're, moving into the Power 5. They're going to be viewed a little differently. So we'll kind of watch that because we know their NIL game is very strong. So you got to keep an eye on them. But with Oklahoma, I think it's going to be largely about where does he fit in their hierarchy, kind of how does he fit into, like I said, all those offensive linemen. Because I had something in Scoop last week, kid out of Kansas, Andrew Babalola, that came in and that Oklahoma really likes. On three's got him as like a top 30 player in the country. And now you throw him in the mix with, the guys we've talked about a lot, Ty Haywood, Michael Fasusi, Lamont Rogers. You just keep running down the list of all these talented offensive linemen. Is Oklahoma ready to push for him? Do they want to wait a little bit, kind of see what plays out? So we'll have to see what happens. But what I will say to take away any mystery of my comments, Cedar Hill, for those that don't know, they are the Longhorns. It is funny to see in red. It always looks weird to me, but they are the Longhorns. And both Jordan and Devin, Devin we haven't talked about yet, throw up the horns at me when I take a picture. And one of their teammates starts ragging, oh, he's committed to Texas. He's taking pictures. And they both were immediately like, no, that's us. We're the Longhorns. Like, that's about that. And so, you don't know what any of that means, but it was kind of a funny moment on the sideline.
Cedar Hill, obviously the former home of Joe McGuire, now the head coach over at Texas Tech. What about Devin Colman, the other offensive lineman / defensive lineman? I know that you sent some video of him playing on the DL there, number 58, 6'5", 315, classmate of Jordan Colman.
It's amazing that you have a guy that's 6'5", 315, and you can just go line him up as a jumbo tight end. Like, that's what they did for him for a huge chunk of this game. He's just playing like I said, that 6th, 7th offensive lineman. And Jordan is probably more advanced right now, but I think Devin's a little more athletic. Like, there's a reason he's lining up out wide, playing some defensive line. I think he's probably an offensive lineman ultimately. Now, he could become one of those, 6'5", 350-pound nose tackles who just eats up interior blocks and kind of plays that role. I could see that in his future because he, again, is just a tremendously large human being. But he has some athleticism to him. Like, if you told me he trimmed up a little bit, got into a weight program, lost a little weight, if you told me he was a right tackle, I could buy that. I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility. I think he's probably a guard, but I like what he brings to the table. I think he might have a little more upside than Jordan Colman. Now, again, you kind of assume they're going to end up together kind of idea. I mean, that just makes sense. But he's an interesting one to watch because, like I said, I could see some people pushing for him down the stretch.
Josh, it feels like this 2025 offensive line class is going to be a pretty good one. I mean, I depending on what Bill Bedenbaugh and this offensive staff decides to do, like you said, a hierarchy there. But do you feel like this could be one of the more talented groups that comes through Norman if they're able to land some of these guys?
I would say that it should be. Like, and I know we've talked about you can't miss on this kind of, but there is so much good offensive line talent right around Oklahoma. And with OU moving to the SEC and all the excitement over Jackson Arnold and all the enthusiasm that will be wrapped into next year, if you can just go out and put a good product on the field, I'm not saying you go out and win 10 or 11 games. I don't think that's a realistic expectation. But if you show that you can handle it, you can be where you need to be, and you show all these offensive linemen, look, this guy's leaving, this guy's going to be gone, and because, I mean, guys, it's crazy to talk about, but at this point, like if you're talking about Jacob Sexton or Caden Green or some of these guys, they're going to be upperclassmen by the time these guys get on campus. So I don't really care how good and youthful your offensive line looks. By the time these guys get there, they're going to have maybe a year to get their feet under them. And then, hey, these are our guys. So I think Oklahoma needs to say however many offensive linemen from these groups we can sign in 2025, that's what we want to do. These are the guys we have to get. We're going to load up on this position a lot like they did on the defensive line in 2024. And you've got to hit. I mean, you've got to get 3 or 4, kind of top 150 overall type players. I'm 3 or 4 is probably strong. 2 or 3. Like you need to do that. And if you get more, then great. But you've got to land those guys to start solidifying that offensive line as you head into the SEC and start developing the depth and the reinforcements this group needs. And I think we can all be honest, kind of lacks right now.
2025, obviously very important for Bill Bedenbaugh and company. 2024, probably even more important here in the intermediate or the future, just in terms of what could be happening here over the next couple weeks. A name that it is time for our weekly Grant Brix installment on the recruiting report. He made it to Norman. I saw the man in the flesh on the field on Saturday. I saw Michael Boganowski's already doing a little bit of recruiting on Twitter on Monday morning. Just in terms of immediate feedback, Josh, how did the weekend go with Grant Brix in town taking in the OU West Virginia game?
I think it went really well. I think Oklahoma did the things they needed to do. We talked about it last week, that it was more about just kind of showing him not only a game day experience, but just letting him be around more of the players. Guys, Michael Boganowski is a really good example. Having him there, he's been on a lot of visits at the same time Grant Brix has, whether it was to Oklahoma, whether it was to Kansas State. So there's some familiarity there. And I think that is those kind of things can't be overlooked. And then you add in, you've got Kevin Sperry there. You've got Michael Hawkins there. You've got a lot of guys who are very active recruiters. Danny Okoye is there. I don't know that I see Danny Okoye and Grant Brix being the perfect fit personality-wise, very different ways in which they look at the world. But,
is there two more polar opposite guys just in terms of like what I think of both of them?
Guys, is that our first NIL TV show? We're going to get those two to be roommates and then just follow their lives.
They'd be like the Odd Couple or something.
That's perfect. But yeah, so, I think with Brix, it went really well. Now what we see is what his plan is.
Sure.
Like, 'cause I don't think anybody knows yet. I don't think it's been clarified. Again, a few weeks ago, this seemed all but done for Oklahoma. And then I know Nebraska's made a really strong push. And if he picks Nebraska at this point, I'm not going to be shocked about it. But I just think with him coming down, making this trip, it felt like I need one last look. I want to look at this stuff. Now, he may run this all the way out to signing day. I haven't heard anything to tell me that there's a decision that's upcoming or anything along those lines, but it's Grant Brix. Like, he could decide while we're doing this and no one should be surprised. Like, he's just a very hard guy to read because he keeps his circle very tight and doesn't talk to many people. and he's in a small town in Iowa. It's not like there's a lot of sources developed in Logan, Iowa. It doesn't work like that. So you kind of have to trust sources, trust people and go from there and just kind of see what happens. But if you made me pick, I'm still picking Oklahoma for Grant Brix.
Josh, is he the last piece or one of the last pieces of this 2024 class? And how big of a get would he be considering how the offensive line recruiting has gone this year?
He's huge. And I think a lot of it's mentality. I know there's some fans out there that are very concerned. And I'm not even saying that there's not some cause to be. This offensive line class hasn't been what anybody wanted it to be. I'm sure if you could get Bill Bedenbaugh with the truth serum, he would tell you this isn't the way he drew this up. At the same time, I think there's some talented guys there, but Grant Brix gives you some credibility, tells you, this is a big battle they won. And I know people say, well, they beat K-State and Nebraska. No, they beat Alabama and literally almost anybody else you want for this. And to go and beat this kid that really didn't want to leave home and to get him to come to Norman, that's a huge win and a real statement for Bill Bedenbaugh and that staff. But I don't know that I would say he's the last piece, because there still is Eddie Pierre-Louis. Tyler Mercer, who came up from Prosper, is another guy. And Eddie, I should, a little behind the scenes for everybody. Eddie always asks me for names I should mention. And of course, I always think of one or two that I forgot. Tyler Mercer is 2024 offensive lineman from Prosper, kind of north of the Dallas area, that is currently committed to Tulane. I think we all can acknowledge Tulane does a very nice job with their evaluation. So if they buy into that kid, I get it. And kind of a big interior offensive lineman would seem to be a good replacement if Eddie Pierre-Louis doesn't work out. And with Eddie, anything's possible. Like
That's right.
He's so different than Grant in that it feels like he's moving in 100 different directions, while Grant just kind of stays the course and you don't really know what that course is. So it's a little different scenario. But talking to Tyler Mercer, his dad is an alum
Of Oklahoma?
He grew up going to OU games. Yeah. So if OU decides to get serious about Tyler Mercer, I think he would be a pretty safe prediction. I think you could, if you see the offer come in, the next tweet that may follow is Josh McCuistion has put in a prediction for Oklahoma and Tyler Mercer.
Couple other guys that visited Norman over the weekend. Somebody that used to play for one of our good buddies, Trent Dilfer in Nashville over at Lipscomb Academy. CJ Jim Coyley, a 6'3", 200, 2025 safety out of Norman. And I know that, Josh, you've put us some stuff on his just kind of reviews of the experience. It sounds like he was singing praises of the experience in Norman over the weekend.
Yeah, he loved the visit. And, for those wondering, I'm working on the idiot right now. As soon as that's over, I'm going to have some updates on some of the guys I've talked to through the weekend. CJ was one of the prominent guys as far as what he had to say, what he was thinking about. I think Oklahoma made a huge step here. Now, the question is, again, kind of like we talked about, when you have 8 commitments this early, Oklahoma can start to be a little choosy. And I'm not saying he's not going to be part of the plans. I'm saying I don't know yet. I think that picture is still clarifying itself as to who Oklahoma, they're watching junior tape. They're still making evaluations, and they're still finding new guys. But the only guy I know is, I think, and we talked about it a few weeks ago, is Jonah Williams. Like, I know he's right at the top of literally everybody in the country's board. And from there, it's not just about who they like the most. What are the numbers going to look like? I mean, they signed a pretty big class this year in the secondary. What do they want to do next year? Is that going to be a little limited, or is this going to be a deal where Oklahoma's constantly signing, 25, 28 guys, and, it'll work itself out numerically through the portal and everything else. So we'll have to kind of see how that plays out. But he's a guy I know they like. He was there this summer. Has a big-time teammate that came in with him back in the summer, Chauncey Gooden, a big offensive lineman also from actually, I don't think he's from Lipscomb. I'm trying to remember I want to say he's a guy that changed schools in the offseason, but I forgive me on that. But they both were on campus this summer, really like things. And talking to CJ today, I just got the feeling that it was kind of one of those deals where the visit just was perfect. Like, just everything he could have wanted, because he talked about loving the game and loving the atmosphere. But then but it wasn't even as good as the coaches and the way the fans were. Like he just sounds like a guy that kind of was on cloud nine following his visit.
What about a 2025 offensive lineman out of Denton Ryan that has some interesting connections back to Oklahoma? The cousin, I believe, of Marcus Mims, Marcus Garcia.
Yeah, Marvin Mims' cousin, big guy. I saw him a couple weeks ago when I watched Ty Haywood.
Yeah.
We keep talking about seeing these big offensive linemen. I mean, their bookend tackles at Denton Ryan average about 6'5" and 290 pounds. So, this is a guy that when I got there, there were several staffs there, including Brad Davis, former OU offensive lineman that is now LSU's offensive line coach, and several staff members from Texas Tech. And I thought, well, okay, they're all here watching Ty Haywood. And I really didn't know a ton about Marcus Garcia. And then you see him in warmups, and you're like, I don't know who that guy is. And you see he's a junior, and you start kind of watching him. And very athletic guy, moves very naturally. Was very impressed with him. And obviously, like we said, a cousin of Marvin Mims, also has a relation to former Alabama running back and Oklahoma recruiting never-ending story for me, Josh Jacobs. So I just keep finding ways to tie my world back to Josh Jacobs. But yeah, so talking to him, he mentioned it. He called it his dream school when we discussed the visit and just what he liked about it. So I think Oklahoma is going to be a very big factor in his recruitment if they want to. But again, we're talking about this 2025 offensive lineman. Guys, I have to start counting my toes to count all these offensive linemen that I think Oklahoma is in very real shape with, that are big time, at very least regional prospects, if not national recruits on the offensive line. So part of that is the 2025 class is so good and seems to be making up for 2024 not, being one of the worst offensive line years I can remember in a while. So there's going to be a lot of schools looking to build depth. So OU, this looks good early on. OU's going to have to fight to the finish, because we all know there's never enough big guys to go around. But I like where they are with him. I think he's kind of a tweener, could play tackle, could play guard. But again, if OU wants to get involved there, they will absolutely be a real factor in his recruitment.
Josh, is this the last big visitor weekend for OU, this last one with West Virginia, given that it's a Friday, 11 a.m. kick the day after Thanksgiving? Like, are you anticipating guys still coming in for that game, or was this West Virginia one kind of the last big one for the season?
There will still be some, because I know I've talked to a couple of guys. I know Terrence Edwards, the big-time corner out of Virginia, he's been planning to come in for that weekend for like 2 months now. That's been his answer for a while, and he's a guy that just loves Oklahoma. Jonathan Hatton, the 2026 running back commitment from Cibolo Steel in the San Antonio area, he's also expected in. And then one of the more interesting ones that I just found out over the weekend as I was kind of running through who was going to be there this weekend was Legend Bay, the kid from Mesquite Horn, the kind of quarterback athlete. And you wonder, does Lamont Rogers, does Markel Ford? I mean, there's 3 guys on the Horn roster that have OU offers. And so you wonder if, maybe those guys come along with him. But, we all know it's going to be tricky. It's the Friday after Thanksgiving. It's an early kick. But what does help Oklahoma, you're getting to the point where every week there are half as many teams playing as there were the week before. So there are a lot of guys that just have a chance. Like, you wonder if maybe Wyatt Gilmore, the defensive end from from Minnesota, he might come down. His season just ended last weekend. So guys like that I've still got to check with, but there is the advantage of there's no film study going on for a lot of these guys. Their years are over. So, as sad as they may be, they can go, kind of salve their wounds with a little time in Norman and getting a little love.
I take no pleasure in reporting this Monday afternoon, but Jimbo Fisher has been released of his duties in College Station. You put something up on Soonerscoop.com on Sunday afternoon, Josh, just in terms of, and this is kind of the life that we live now, just as far as the transfer portal and all of that kind of stuff that is out there. Oklahoma, they make their way back in. Do they have any inroads on guys that are currently committed to that A&M class or possibly on the A&M roster right now that are maybe looking to make a move?
You're so right, Eddie. It's so foreign because, like, I'm so used to looking at a commitment list and saying, okay, they were here in the race for this guy. They were there. Okay, these 2 or 3 guys.
Sure.
But then you almost go look at the 100-man roster and you're like, okay, they liked him. And obviously with the way A&M's recruited, you could go half a dozen deep. I mean, you could go a dozen deep in A&M's roster because there's so many quality players. But you're trying to make realistic connections. Guys that you really think could make some sense. I think in the recruiting class, there's 2 that make sense. Terry Bussey, the wide receiver from Timpson, Texas, the 5-star guy. Since his commitment, I really kind of thought OU would have a bigger role than they have. I mean, he's visited LSU once or twice in that time, and OU's just never really come to pass. And so I don't know if LSU has just moved ahead as the more likely option, and that may well be the case. But I wouldn't be shocked at all if he got back to Norman at some point between now and signing day. And if that's the case, Oklahoma's the one school recruiting him as receiver. We know that they will, they've got some NIL stuff for him, maybe not what A&M was doing, but it'll be interesting to see how that all gets looked at now that A&M's dealing with this massive buyout and how some of the money guys are going to feel about that. But the other would be Dominic McKinley, the big defensive lineman from Louisiana, a guy that I think pretty clearly Oklahoma finished second for in his recruitment the first time around. Now, he's already tweeted out, he's sticking with Elijah Robinson, their defensive line coach. But there's some talk, who knows what will happen with Elijah Robinson. He is a big-time recruiter. The next coach may well keep him, just kind of like you saw with Brent Venables keeping a lot of the offensive staff at Oklahoma. Maybe Mike Elko comes in, continues to work with Elijah Robinson as he did when he was DC. There's a lot of ways that can play, but if that gets thrown into flux and he ends up somewhere else, then, kind of all bets are off. And, I think A&M, Texas, LSU, and Oklahoma would, be right back in that chase again. And I know this answer is running extremely long. The portal, David Hicks is the first guy you look at. I mean, that's the one that makes all the sense in the world. Guys, I was there at his commitment announcement when everybody in the world thought it was going to be. Yeah.
I don't even remember that. What happened?
Oh, Eddie, it's a Josh Waraboko moment to put it in perspective for you.
Okay. Yeah. All of a sudden that comes racing back to my memory.
But no, with Hicks, you get a guy that loved Todd Bates. I still think to this day that was probably David's best relationship. He really, and his father also really, there was a lot of respect for Todd Bates. I know dating back to before Bates came to campus, there were staffs I would talk to that would say, watch out for Clemson in this thing. Todd Bates, they really like him. They like the NFL production. They like Brent Venables, all those kind of things. So if David, it's a question of David Hicks hits the portal. If he hits the portal, I think Oklahoma is probably even money to be where he ends up. I think that's a very good possibility. It makes a lot of sense because they kind of have all the gears in place. Like they know what they wanted to do. They know what the NIL package was going to be. They know what the plan is for him once he gets to campus. That it's just like, okay, we left this car sitting over here to the side. We just got to turn the key on. Like it's all there. So that makes a lot of sense. And with that is also Damian Sanford, his teammate at Katy Paytow, that was, was offered almost a year ago. It was like November 2nd last year, where OU was trying to make a late run at David after he'd committed to A&M. And guys, you look at it, it makes a lot of sense. Damian Sanford, very big, athletic linebacker. Oklahoma doesn't have a pure linebacker in this 2024 class. James Ness is kind of an edge, kind of a linebacker. So maybe he fits a need as well as, being a guy that could help them kind of push David Hicks over the finish line. So we'll see where that goes. But those are the two that really jump out to me. And I would say to a lesser degree, Cam Dewberry, just because I know the relationship he had with Bill Bedenbaugh.
Josh, let me put it this way. Over or under 1.5 players either currently on the roster or committed to A&M end up at Oklahoma?
Oh man, that's a strong number.
Put them
George.
up against it.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to happen. I will say it this way. I would expect more possibility from the current roster than I would the recruiting.
Okay.
So I would probably say under. I think it's probably going to be 1.
Yeah.
OU fans can read into that. I think it's a one that would make them really happy if it comes to pass. But we'll again, it's one of these deals, and we saw it a couple of years ago, guys. George was off gallivanting in the NFL, but Eddie and I lived through this. Like, there is this, somebody compared it to the tides. Like, this is a low tide where it feels like everything's going to go wrong. A&M's going to burn to the ground. All these guys are going to leave. And then somebody gets hired, and then, okay, things get solidified. So it's easy to run and get crazy right now, but I would just be surprised with all the head-to-head battles those two programs have had, Oklahoma and A&M, if Oklahoma didn't at least get one out of this race.
I just hate it for Jimbo. I really do. I'm saying that with a smile. It's not to make light of the situation. I just hate it for him. Oklahoma. What?
I was going to ask, is anybody, if we had a check on Taylor Ham, is he okay? I'm a little worried.
The bathroom door was locked, but I think he locked himself in there. So
apparently Jimbo did lock the bathroom door when he was done. So that's exciting.
I could see that. He didn't need TP. He had somebody to do it for him. Oklahoma did win 59-20 over the weekend. It is a Victory Monday back here in Norman. Josh, I know that we already did the Eskridge Lexus postgame show. Why weren't you up at 3:30 to join us over the weekend?
It's weird. I feel like you guys have extremely low expectations, and the best part is I think they were very valid. I was absolutely not up at that time. I didn't get hit with the "you up," tweet or DM at that time of night from you guys. So
George sent one. It just wasn't to you.
Oh,
we're wiping that. We're wiping that from the
George
show.
stays catching dating strays. But no, guys, it was. And I want you guys to know I listen in the mornings. The next morning when I get up and you guys are rightfully still sleeping, I'm taking part.
No F-bombs this week.
Was it even more aggravating or frustrating to watch what they put out offensively, whether it be the 644 yards, 8.3 per play, Dylan Gabriel with the school record 8 touchdowns, Drake Stoops doing what he did? Was it even more frustrating to watch that performance on Saturday night against a decent West Virginia team, and then having watched what Central Florida did to Oklahoma State, Texas Tech did to Kansas? Does it almost make more questions about what happened over the last 2 weeks rather than what happened this past weekend?
I think George said it in the post game, and he's right. Guys, if that Oklahoma team that we saw on Saturday night in Norman plays against Kansas or Oklahoma State, they probably do about the same thing to those two teams. Like, West Virginia is not discernibly worse than Oklahoma State or Kansas. They may not. I would probably have those two teams a little bit ahead of West Virginia, but not a lot. And I don't know if it was the home crowd. I don't know what it was. But you're right, Eddie. I mean, you're just like, guys, you had all this in your hands, and you just dropped the ball. And you hate to be thinking about that when they're clearly playing one of their better games of the year, guys. I would say this one, Iowa State and Texas. I mean, those are clearly their three best games in my estimation. And guys, West Virginia had no business on the field with Oklahoma. This game could have been worse, because the only reason it was 17-7 instead of 21-7 early in that game is Dylan Gabriel misses a throw he'd make 99 times out of 100 to Drake Stoops in the corner. There were all these little things that even as dominant as it was, you're like, well, that could have been better. That could have been better. And again, it was. This is the team they were capable of being, and
sure.
You kind of. I can't even imagine for OU fans watching that offense, because so much of the stuff that they hated, the jet sweeps, the lateral throws, all of a sudden they just disappeared. This team attacks vertically and gets physical up front, and all of a sudden the skies open up.
I was just about to ask Josh, what did OU, because that was the story to me, is the offense finally figuring it out. Did OU do anything differently, or was it as simple as they didn't make as many mistakes? Obviously, they didn't turn the ball over, other than the muff punt, which, again, is not on the offense. And then they started throwing the ball down the field, and they ran the ball well. They stuck with Gavin Sawchuk. He had 22 carries. I mean, was there anything that they did differently? I know you put up some stuff on the Monday Morning Idiot, but anything stand out that they were doing differently this game?
No, I mean, like I said, there was definitely more vertical throws. They were definitely trying to attack downfield. And, guys, West Virginia has a rep of being fairly aggressive on the outside, but so does UCF. So, like, I don't know that was some, mitigating factor or really changed the outcome or the way it was working. I just saw an offense that looked more aggressive. Like they were just trying to, it looked like attack. Like that's what they were thinking about the whole time. And guys, we even saw there were some moments when Oklahoma would get into a 3rd and long, and the body language looked better. They looked like, okay, let's go make a play. Like and then a lot of it's this guy, Drake Stoops, just kept bailing Oklahoma. And the rare, I say, that made it sound bad. Whenever Oklahoma did get into trouble, Drake Stoops just would make a play and would find a way to get them out of trouble and would do something good for him. And I wanted Drake Stoops to spike that ball as well. I am it's my new pillar of my existence is I am very anti-spike rules. So I'm against all of that. But yeah, I don't think there was any drastic change here, George. I mean, not at least not that anyone can't see with eyes. I mean, they just stopped moving so much laterally and started getting downfield, and Dylan Gabriel had a nice night.
It was a hell of a throw. As much as like the Drake Stoops, that final touchdown there in the north end zone, or at least the one through the air. He later ran in one after the 4th down play that'll be coming up in these highlights. But Dylan Gabriel did play well, and I think that it is somewhat frustrating to see an offense that is capable of putting up 600, 700 yards. We'll round back into some Jeff Lebby talk here at the end, but defensively, I think that it was something that I think you had put out on Friday night or maybe even Saturday morning leading up to the 6 o'clock kickoff on Saturday evening. Kip Lewis made the start alongside Danny Stutzman. I know that we talked about it on the Eskridge Lexus postgame show just in forms of they have maybe 3 or 4 linebackers that you could really count on right now. That thing looked pretty damn good once again on Saturday night, and that thing being Oklahoma's defense.
Yeah, guys. I mean, you look at the pieces, and I talked about this a little bit last week. I am already starting to look at what does 2024 look like, and I know I'm not alone in that. I know we've had some conversations as a group, but guys, you just look at it. I mean, if Danny Stutzman returns and Billy Bowman returns, that back 7. Guys, I don't feel crazy in saying that's a top 4 back 7 in the SEC next year. Like I believe that. Now we'll have to see, and they'll have to prove it. Gentry Williams is going to have to stay healthy. You're going to have to figure out who replaces Woody Washington at the other corner, who's been so steady for Oklahoma this year. But guys, the guy that, and I know you all have talked about it in the last couple postgame pods. Kendall Dolby is playing unbelievably good football right now for Oklahoma. He does a lot of good things. I wonder if he'll get a look at that corner opposite of Gentry in 2024. I just the way they run to the football, and one of the bigger stories to me is how good Jaron Canick looked coming off the bench. He made some great plays in that game.
I said it on the postgame show.
I like so much of it.
Josh, I said it on the postgame show. Getting quote unquote benched might have been one of the best things that could have happened to Jaron Canick, because maybe there was a little too much thinking. And when you do get benched, I think that his personality would just say, F it. I'm going to go do what I know how to do and not think as much, just react to plays rather than, having to really kind of make a bunch of decisions, I guess, if that makes sense.
Because, guys, when you watch Kip Lewis, you're not thinking like, oh, man, he just has a full understanding of this defense. No. Kip Lewis just says, I'm going to go make plays. Like, sure. I'm going to be around the ball. I may make a mistake, but I'm going to do it at 100 miles an hour. And I think Jaron was like that at points early in the year, and then it just got to be like, I got to stop everything. I got to be perfect. And you're like, man, like in this day and age of college football and the way they're going to attack you and all the RPO and all the different ways they can affect you, there's going to be some things that are open. You have to live with that. But if you can do it moving really fast, you're going to end up right more often than wrong. And I wonder if Jaron kind of sees that, and I don't want to say like takes inspiration is a totally cheesy thing to say, but like that play right there that we're running is Jaron just being the athlete that he is, and chases Garrett Green, who we all know can run if you put that dude in space. Like and Jaron just tracks him down like it's nothing, and it's just an impressive play.
I think you mentioned it in the report card that you put up Saturday night after the game. It just seemed like his explosion or explosiveness to the football was maybe more so than we had seen in a while, and I just wonder if that's he was almost thinking too much.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there's one of the plays by Dolby that I literally just got done highlighting in the Idiot. I mean, again, I like so much of what I saw of the defense. And, West Virginia, Neil Brown's a good play caller. Like they schemed some stuff up and it worked well. And, they found some things. But guys, I mean, they dominated a team largely on offense that basically had 3 drives and didn't do anything else the rest of the night.
Yeah.
Like it wasn't like, OU's bending and then they'd stop, kind of like we'd seen at points early in the year when, teams would drive inside the 20 and then OU would come up and force a field goal or something like that. Like they were just 3 and out, 3 and out, 3 and out.
It definitely seems too like George, and I think that we hit on this a little bit in the postgame pod. I don't know how much it just helps with him being out there. Obviously, the play on the field is pretty obvious out there, just with what Danny Stutzman gives you in contribution. But I think just his presence out there has helped that defense. It almost made it seem like they could breathe a little bit, knowing that their leader was back out on the field with them.
Brent said it best. He's an emotional lift on the field for them, and I think that's the truth. And he also, look, he's played more than a lot of these other guys at linebacker especially, and so he understands the defense probably better than anybody out there right now, so that helps. But I think he's the emotional leader of the defense and maybe even the entire team. So, I think it was huge getting him back. He had a big day. I think he led the team in tackles. Kip Lewis was right behind him. It's going to be interesting to see what happens with that linebacker group. I know in my mailbag this week I got a question saying, do you think all 4 of those guys will come back? I think they will. I know that it's tough because how do you get all 4 of those guys on the field? But you look at the development of all of them. Even Kobe McKenzie, who hasn't played as much as the other guys, he's played great when he's gotten his chances.
Had a pick.
And I would think those guys would look at it and be, man, we're developing really well as players. Eventually, their time is going to come. Danny would be his last year next year, and then it's an open competition for that other spot, I would think. And I also think knowing Brent, if he gets all those guys back, I feel like he'll find a way to maybe do something where he has a package where it's Danny, Jaron, and Kip Lewis all in at the same time. Like I could see something like that. I know Kip even played Cheetah, I think early in the year. At some points he would come in and do that. So I think that linebacker group is pretty special.
There is a lot of decisions to be made here in probably about the next month and a half. Real quick, just to close out today's recruiting report, Josh, it's already started. The coaching carousel has already started. Jimbo getting fired down in Texas A&M. Zach Arnett got fired today at Mississippi State. There's been some angling there with Zach Selman, who's obviously his connections back to Oklahoma, was lieutenant, I think, for Joe Castiglione is probably the best way to put it, in the athletic department. Now the AD down in Starkville. Just kind of your general thoughts engaging Jeff Lebby. His name's going to come up quite a bit. That leads into the Jackson Arnold stuff. We can kind of finish this conversation in the unofficial 40 on Wednesday, but just kind of your overall thoughts on the coaching carousel it's already begun.
Yeah, you're kind of waiting for that breaking point because really before Jimbo Fisher, you had Mel Tucker and you had the Northwestern, the Pat Fitzgerald situation. So, I mean, you had
that
2
interim coaches done
off-field
a hell
scandals.
of a job up in Chicago.
Is that guy not the Big Ten Coach of the Year? Like, he almost has to be.
Well,
right?
I have
that's amazing.
If I had a vote, I'd be voting for Jim Harbaugh, but that's just me.
Well, I mean, could give it up to Sharon Moore just for post-game speeches alone. I mean, you gotta love that. But like I said, Jeff Lebby's a really interesting conversation because, I know, George, maybe you asked him. I heard somebody ask or mention that Neil Brown had given, a lot of praise to Jeff Lebby after the game, and I think when you talk to people around college football, there is a lot of respect for Jeff Lebby. There are a lot of people that think he's very good. And, when you see what you saw Saturday night, you're like, he can be that guy. Like that absolutely is possible. There's just these weird little hiccups. But again, I think there's always that other factor with him of the whole Baylor situation, how some schools are going to feel about that, right or wrong, however you take that. But I think it's going to be what is the appetite. Now, the Mississippi State one's really interesting because I feel like there's an argument to be made that Jeff Lebby, given enough time, could maybe have a better first head coaching job than Mississippi State. But at the same time, how many of them are ready to go right now at a Power 5 program that has some, that Mississippi State has some success. I mean, with the right coach, guys like Jackie Sherrill, Dan Mullen. I mean, people have won at Mississippi State. It's just really tough because you're in that, and now I guess maybe you look at it as with divisions potentially going away, or I guess are going away, maybe that life gets easier. You're not having to face Alabama and LSU every year. I mean, maybe that's not how that's going to work. So we'll have to see, kind of how he would view that job. But I think for Mississippi State, Jeff Lebby makes a ton of sense. Like I think that adds up. Like you said, the Zach Selman connection. There are several jobs that I could see him fitting. It's just what he wants to do. Is he ready to make that step? And I think he is, but is he in such a hurry to do it that he'll kind of overlook some hazards? Or is it, I'm not leaving until it's absolutely the right situation?
And especially with his relationship with Jackson Arnold, that kind of makes that whole conversation really, really interesting here moving forward. But I know that Jackson Arnold's dad tweeted you, George, said that he's happy and all that kind of stuff. I don't know if I expected him to say anything else. I don't get the feeling, though, that Jackson's looking to go, even if Jeff Lebby wasn't the offense coordinator at Oklahoma. And I somewhat expect him to be the offense coordinator. I don't know. Both of you guys agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, we were talking before we got on here. I'm not sure OU's going to have any staff changes. If you ask me right now,
10-2, I mean, should you? I mean, the improvement has been.
Well, I mean,
the
only thing is you look at, could someone come in and poach somebody?
Sure.
I feel like DeMarco Murray's name comes up every year. I don't think he'll leave unless it's like some coordinator job, if that's something he wants to do.
That was asked to me this morning. Like, I don't know if DeMarco has goals of trying to be an offense coordinator. I really don't.
Yeah, I don't know either. Bill Bedenbaugh's name seems to come up every year too. I don't think he wants to leave. I don't see any changes on the defensive staff coming other than maybe Ted Roof retiring. So I don't know. It's going to be interesting. You never know, and that's why it's who knows what jobs will come open. I mean, the Arkansas job I think is an interesting one if it comes open. Would Jeff Lebby be considered there? I don't know.
That there's always the chain reaction, the stuff that you can't, like, 'cause we can all talk about head coaching spots and who would follow, but then okay, this offensive coordinator spot opens up. Well, does Joe John Finley entertain that possibility?
Sure.
I mean, there's all those little caveats that you can't really see coming that I think usually end up in stuff. But I'm with George. To me, the most probable is if they decide, okay, Ted Roof, you can, maybe Ted Roof wants to stay on as an analyst or something along that. And they start to build those roles in the coaching staff because they don't have the Nick Saban, the Kirby Smart type analyst room where you've got former, coordinators, watching these things and checking them out for you. So you wonder, could he move to that kind of role? And then you get a young active recruiter, which I think alleviates some of what I'm talking about when I talk about Brent as the head coach and defensive coordinator. Because, you go get, whether it's James Skalski, who I know a lot of people point to, or somebody else, just a active recruiter that can kind of help Oklahoma land a guy or two this year. I mean, guys, they don't have, like I said earlier, they don't have a linebacker in this class. And I think some of that is by design, but at the same time, they went after guys like Braden Platt. They went after plenty of guys and didn't get them. So I don't think it was the entire idea. But you need to be landing some guys, and you need a guy that can recruit an area to a really high degree. And again, if Ted Roof's that guy, fine. But it doesn't seem, just looking at what's happening so far, that doesn't seem to be the case.
Very good. That's going to do it. Some interesting weeks ahead. We'll see if Oklahoma can get back into a Big 12 championship title race as, there's some really interesting games coming up this weekend that we will get into more coming up on Tuesday as well as Wednesday on the Unofficial 40. Josh, thank you for joining us here on the SoonerScoop.com YouTube channel. Georgia and I will be back on Tuesday after we talk to Brent Venables and some players on Monday night. Talk to you then.